Welcome to the Advance Your Art podcast, where we talk about the journey from artist to entrepreneur and everything in between. You've worked hard to hone your craft. Now take it to the next level with tips, techniques, strategies, and routines used by successful artists to grow their businesses and careers. Now, let's get started and have some fun with your host, Yuri Cataldo.
Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me and letting me rhyme, apparently, right in the beginning. How are you today?
Yuri, thanks so much for having me, man. I was hoping I would get that great laugh out of the way early. I love it.
I appreciate that. It's not difficult to make me start laughing at all kinds of things. So hopefully you're prepared for it to happen again and again.
Yeah, I've been listening to your episodes, and you're not afraid to laugh and be in the moment. So you're exactly my kind of podcast host. I'm honored to be here.
Perfect. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. So I would like to start off with my usual question for guests, and that is, how do you describe yourself and what you do?
Great question, obviously, and I'm a teacher, but I try to be intentionally different than other teachers. I always think back to every time you're at a dinner party or, you're with friends and they say, what do you do? And you say, oh, I'm a teacher. Oh, my God, that's so hard. What grade do you teach? Mm-hmm. And there's that awesome moment where I already know that no matter what grade I say, they're going to say, well, that must be hard. So if I tell the truth, which is 12th grade and public speaking and creative writing, they're like, oh, my God, how do you deal with the seniors? Yeah. If I lie, oh, first grade, oh, my God, how do you do that? Those kids are running around like crazy. What they really want to say, I've found over the years, is how and why did you become a teacher? Mm-hmm. So what I try to do intentionally, and I've been doing it now for maybe the last 10 of my 19 years, is just try to challenge conventional wisdom in the classroom and through the educational process. It would be very, I don't know, a feat, too snobbish to say I'm a learner and not a teacher. So I didn't want to say that to you. But the reality is I try to be the best learner in the room, mm-hmm. and I try to model for my students that I'm learning. And a big part of that has been pushing myself outside the classroom. A very basic thing that people can do in the classroom is write with their students, write the piece of writing you're assigning to them. And then when we transition to interviewing people and podcasting and being on great shows like yours, it's difficult for the student to then not respect you because you're doing the work. Mm-hmm. You know what it's like on the journey. So I'm a learner, lifelong learner. You heard that cliche a million times, but I just find that the curiosity that I follow, if I can transfer it to my students in one arena of my life and then on the podcast in another, and then that's led to some speaking opportunities, it fills my soul in kind of all the right buckets. And then all of a sudden I feel like one thing feeds the other. So that's about as concise as I can make it, but I'm on fire on a regular basis in terms of learning.
Yeah, well, that's great. How has the teaching classroom changed over the years since you first started?
Do you mean specifically my classroom or what I've observed in all classrooms?
A combination of both, like yours specifically, but also just, since you've been doing it 18 years now?
Yeah, this is year 19, sure.
Okay. So how has it changed when you first started to what it is now? And what are you noticing with the students and just the environment in general?
Yeah, if I could thread the needle between both of them, what I would say is that our teenagers today really, really want to know why they're doing something. It is not abnormal at all for people like you and me to talk and say, yeah, our teachers used to say because I said so. Mm-hmm. My mom and dad used to say because I'm the mother or I'm the father.
Right.
If you try that in today's classroom, it is an absolute death wish. They want no part of you. I mean, we always used to say, adults had to, they were given respect. It was just granted. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't work that way, in my opinion, anymore. It needs to be earned. So right away, I get ahead of it. And this is something that's come in the last 10 years. You get ahead of it and tell them on every single activity, you give them the why. You think about Simon Sinek in the corporate world starting with why. Mm-hmm. In the classroom, it works just as well, if not better, because you have a 17-year-old kid who's having a hard time figuring out why you're going to be needing Shakespeare in the marketing field, phys ed field, nursing field. So if that's the path you want to go with curriculum, I found you darn well better be sure that you know why you're doing it, not because the state said so, although that would happen once in a while. Yeah. That can't be the majority of it. So that's the overwhelming thing I've seen. And a lot of it comes down to leadership, having a principal and a superintendent that says yes to my crazy ideas. It really supports my autonomy in the classroom. So then when I try things that are abnormal and you get a yes and it has a purpose, I find that it just continues to kind of push that flywheel. So that's the way that I would answer that question in terms of what's changed. The kids haven't changed. We've all heard the quote from Socrates, how he was criticizing teenagers centuries ago. It's not, they haven't changed that much. We have the digital devices, which is a conversation for another day. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, I think the best teachers are the ones who have changed, and they realize that kids really want to know why.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fascinating. And I also remember that as a kid growing up and having my parents, when I say why, them responding with, because I said so, just go do it. So that's
yeah, there's no quicker way to burn trust, right, than to say that. Yeah. And you strike me in kind of diving into your work as an ideation guy, a guy that's constantly following ideas and passions. And I imagine you, if I may, in the classroom, teacher throws an archaic assignment at you that you just know it will never, ever appear again in the natural world. It's so difficult to be motivated, no matter how curious you are, when you can't link it to something that's actually going to pay a dividend for you. Mm-hmm. It's tricky. It really is.
Yeah. Well, so I also remember, because I used to be a professor at a couple different universities, and I would purposefully give my students assignments that didn't seem like there was an obvious reason at the moment, and then try to connect the dots for them in a couple of weeks to keep them on task. And okay. It worked a little bit in the beginning, but when I did it when I first started teaching, I think this was 2011, and maybe it also was just because the subject matter too, because early on I was teaching theater, and then later on I was teaching entrepreneurship and a few other things. But for the theater students anyway, in the beginning, when I gave them assignments that didn't seem like there was an obvious connection, and then connected the dots for them later, they loved it, and they wanted more of kind of exciting things that made them think outside of the classroom type of thing. But yeah, it was a delicate balance, I guess, from what I've noticed before.
And just to kind of put punctuation on that doesn't surprise me at all, because you're getting a kid that's in the theater program for the experience.
Yeah.
They want to be taken on a journey. They want to be present. So as long as they trust you, which they obviously did, they're going to be much more apt to say, hey, professor is going to take us to a good place. Let's see where this is.
Yeah, exactly. So why did you want to be a teacher in the subject matter that you are?
Limited skill in other places.
Okay.
If you think about it, right? I mean,
yeah.
I look back to college and I think about it like I majored in literature communications, and then quickly I realized that I could skew more towards communications and get the same degree. Mm-hmm. I wasn't the biggest reader back then. I've since become a voracious reader, but at that time, college kids don't have as much free time as it was told we were going to, right. And you're not reading for pleasure, so you really have very little chance to become a reader at that point until later. And then I took, honestly, 4 or 5 classes in education as a minor, mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, they're like, all right, you're going to student teach. And I'm saying, okay, this is where you actually learn the craft. I student taught in the fall of my senior year, and it wasn't until the first day. Sometimes people say, when did you know you want to be a teacher? And I'll say, September 4th, 1999. And they're always blown away. And I'm like, well, that was the first day of school when I student taught with my mentor. Mm-hmm. And he showed me that by presenting to these students time and time again, you get to form relationships. Now, you don't know that right away. You're kind of thinking I'm a content teacher. But it ultimately, I guess the answer to your question that's a little more elegant would be, it's the only subject where I know for sure you get to know the students on a more personal level, guaranteed. Mm-hmm. Because the skills that you're teaching, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, they transfer over so many fields. So a kid in my public speaking class is sharing about his or her life, not necessarily a piece of content. So we just did Ignite talks in my classroom, and they get to talk about whatever they want. So I have one kid talking about ADHD, and she reveals that she has ADHD mm-hmm. during the talk. She's not afraid to be that vulnerable in the classroom. And I've recently had some guests come in the classroom and remark that if they were going to describe the classroom in one word, I was honored that they chose safe. And I keep getting this feedback this year that the classroom is a safe place to be yourself. And after 19 years there, if I can create a safe place for 17 and 18-year-old kids to express themselves and move forward, it's just the kind of career that it's difficult for me to get burnt out on, because that's a thing that is filling, and it just continues to kind of spiral down in a good way.
Yeah. So I would imagine in this type of environment, or actually just in general, the idea of, well, so people find oftentimes public speaking to be terrifying. How do you help your students, or even yourself, get past the idea of fear, and have the confidence to not only speak in front of other people, but also like reveal personal things about themselves in a classroom setting like that?
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this question. I'll answer it in a couple of ways. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that if you're a practitioner of that which you teach, it helps a lot. Mm-hmm. Recently, I was honored to go and speak at a major corporate event. They actually, I was thrilled when they invited me to go speak at one of their retreats. So they had a 2-day retreat. And I didn't realize it until halfway through, but I was the keynote speaker. You know, when you don't do a lot of keynote, you're like, wait, I'm the guy? And they're
Surprise.
like, yeah, you're the keynote. Like, there's no one else. You're the guy. And, you know, you get that imposter syndrome kicks in a little bit, and you're like, these people are paying me to speak, and I want to do a great job. So I'm in the hotel the night before, and I'm studying my notes, and I'm getting prepared. I want to be totally prepared. Wake up every hour, on the hour, nervous for the speech. The morning of the speech, I don't know how I could put this, but nausea was in play, right? I felt myself almost to the point of nausea. Like, I couldn't believe how nervous I was. Here I am, 40 years old, teaching my students every day that you got to face your fears, you got to do this, and I'm saying, I don't know if I can do this. I'm having that actual reaction, and this is recent, Yuri. So I'm saying to myself, okay, everyone's told me that this means you're excited. This means that your compass is pointing towards fear. You're doing the right thing, and you're going to get through this. So now I have that story in my reservoir. I go to the event. It exceeds my expectations. The feedback on the talk exceeded their expectations. I was truly flattered to hear how well it went. I knew it was going well while it was happening, but 5 hours earlier, I was at the point where everybody else reads about in the movies, right? You're just so nervous you don't think you're going to make it. Reason I share that story is because I keep getting told that it doesn't go away. You know, I might never be that severely nervous again, but the reality is now I have that story to go back to my students. Now I have that story to share on my podcast. Now I have that story to share with your listeners. Just because you have a podcast, you sit in front of a mic and you do it every day in the classroom, doesn't mean when you're faced with a new environment, it's going to go smoothly before the event. Now, if I was that nervous during the event, that may be a telltale sign I'm in the wrong field. But during the event, didn't feel any of it. That's to say, now I go back to my students and say, look, this is going to happen as you change environments. But you need reps. You need reps and you need feedback. In the classroom, we break it up to minors and majors. So we try to have them speaking every day on a minor level. I mean, it literally could be, what's your favorite book? Or what's the favorite thing for you to put on a hot dog? Just get them up there for 5 minutes unprepared. Then every 2 weeks or so, we'll do a major speech, or every 3 or 4 weeks, where they now have to do a how-to speech, a demonstration, or a persuasive speech. So what I have found, and I would love to see this in other classrooms, because the feedback loop is so immediate, the student knows while they're giving the speech how they're doing. And then right afterwards, we give them feedback in front of the class. And as long as I've done the hard work of making it a trusting and safe environment, they're going to get so many quick feedback loops that you can't help but grow. There's so few things in our life. Think about it. You and I do podcasts. If you get a letter from a fan, you're thrilled. Like this, it means so much. But you don't, unless it's different than my podcast, you don't get a letter after every episode. So now you're saying, wow, imagine getting 20 letters after every podcast about how that show was and how you can improve. And that's what's happening in the classroom when I do it right.
Yeah. So no, I do not often get feedback or letters, but when I do, it is very meaningful because I always love hearing from people, even just ones who just like stumbled across the podcast in a random episode about how much they loved or didn't like a topic. I've gotten both of those. In your experience, then, what has been